I travel to Europe. Let's see. Oh, well. Oh.
I travel to Europe every summer. I travel to Europe for fun. I travel to Europe with my family. I travel to Europe by plane. I travel to Europe to explore new places. I travel to Europe during the holidays. I travel to Europe for sightseeing. I travel to Europe to learn about history. I travel to Europe alone. I travel to Europe with friends. I travel to Europe once a year. I travel to Europe in the winter. I travel to Europe to enjoy the food. I travel to Europe to take photos. I travel to Europe to visit museums. I travel to Europe by train. I travel to Europe on business trips. I travel to Europe to relax. I travel to Europe to study languages. I travel to Europe for adventure. I travel to Europe with a tour group. I travel to Europe every spring. I travel to Europe to hike in the mountains. I travel to Europe to enjoy the culture. I travel to Europe to meet new people. I travel to Europe and stay in hotels. I travel to Europe to write in my journal. I travel to Europe to attend concerts. I travel to Europe to see famous landmarks. I travel to Europe for inspiration. I travel to Europe to paint landscapes. I travel to Europe to visit old castles. I travel to Europe to taste new dishes. I travel to Europe with a backpack. I travel to Europe every autumn. I travel to Europe to take cooking classes. I travel to Europe to enjoy the beaches. I travel to Europe to ride bicycles. I travel to Europe with my camera. I travel to Europe to stay in hostels. I travel to Europe on a budget. I travel to Europe to shop in markets. I travel to Europe for work and pleasure. I travel to Europe to see art galleries. I travel to Europe to walk in old towns. I travel to Europe to visit friends. I travel to Europe to take language classes. I travel to Europe to try new experiences. I travel to Europe to enjoy street music. I travel to Europe to relax in cafes. I travel to Europe to enjoy the snow. I travel to Europe by cruise ship. I travel to Europe to attend festivals. I travel to Europe to take day trips. I travel to Europe to enjoy the weather. I travel to Europe to go skiing. I travel to Europe to visit historic cities. I travel to Europe to study abroad. I travel to Europe with a guidebook. I travel to Europe for personal growth. I travel to Europe to write poetry. I travel to Europe to find peace. I travel to Europe to see cathedrals. I travel to Europe with excitement. I travel to Europe and enjoy the views. I travel to Europe to take walking tours. I travel to Europe to enjoy different accents. I travel to Europe with curiosity. I travel to Europe to celebrate holidays. I travel to Europe for weekend getaways. I travel to Europe and try new things. I travel to Europe to take long walks. I travel to Europe to attend workshops. I travel to Europe to study architecture. I travel to Europe and make new friends. I travel to Europe to escape routine. I travel to Europe to visit churches. I travel to Europe to discover new cities. I travel to Europe and enjoy quiet mornings. I travel to Europe to enjoy public parks. I travel to Europe to capture memories. I travel to Europe to see the countryside. I travel to Europe to enjoy local art. I travel to Europe and learn history. I travel to Europe for peace and quiet. I travel to Europe for hiking trails. I travel to Europe to enjoy night markets. I travel to Europe to explore ruins. I travel to Europe for special events. I travel to Europe for relaxation. I travel to Europe to learn customs. I travel to Europe to take photos of nature. I travel to Europe to experience seasons. I travel to Europe and stay in small towns. I travel to Europe to take part in local life. I travel to Europe and enjoy the sunrise. I travel to Europe for delicious meals. I travel to Europe and enjoy quiet streets. I travel to Europe to hear different languages. I travel to Europe to enjoy every moment.